All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Krista Green, and I am Program Officer for the GRIT Fund. I am going to share my screen. And all right. So I hope you all know that you're here to find out more information about the GRIT Fund. And you should know that the GRIT Fund supports projects that add to the vibrancy of Baltimore's cultural community, arts and culture community. We are part of the regranting network from the Andy Warhol Foundation. That is where we get our pass-through funding from for the GRIT Fund. And so we're very thankful that we get funds from them to provide for all of you. And of course, GRIT Fund is a program of the Peel Museum, and the Peel is Baltimore's community museum. If you all have not been to the Peel, I would urge you to check out our website and see what our upcoming programs are. There's always performances and exhibitions going on there, and it's a really fabulous space, especially now that we just finished our renovation. So the space is gorgeous. Okay, so the GRIT Fund awards funds to artist-led collaborative projects up to $10,000. We are particularly looking for proposals that use the visual arts to create very public-facing projects. So because our funding is from the Warhol Foundation is very focused on visual arts. And so there needs to be a strong visual arts component in your GRIT Fund proposal. All types of projects have been funded. So here's a list here: exhibitions, publications, film screenings, festivals. Again, we're not restricting, or the only restriction for your project is that it needs to have a public-facing component. And also it has to have a strong visual arts component. Ooh. These are the types of projects that are not eligible. So, and I'm just going to read them out. So projects seeking support retroactively or for reimbursement of a past project. So if you had a project that you've completed, you can't come to the GRIT Fund for funding for something that's already happened. Proposals that are funding a solo exhibition or travel costs. Again, this is really about community engagement and collaboration and public-facing projects. So we're not really interested in solo exhibitions, etc. Again, that's an individual artist presenting just their work. That's not the type of proposal that we're interested in receiving. And again, you have to have that public-facing component. So there are core values that resonate through the GRIT Fund's application process, as well as its review process and also its final reporting process. Those are collaboration, accessibility. We want that work to have a certain level of resonance, be risk-taking, and then have cultural integrity. So again, what's the relationship between the artists and the organizers? How are they presenting traditions or coming together, working with community to present those things? How was the work developed? Was it developed in community, or was it just a person's idea? All of those things are looked at in the proposal. And then again, these are the exact things that the jury will be ranking your proposal by. And then if you are an award recipient, this is the same way that you would be reporting in your final report. We try to keep that consistent. So the timeline: on April 30th, your applications are due. um, I know there are people waiting for the last minute. Don't do it. Don't do it. As much as you can, start your applications now. That way, if you have questions while you're doing it, you could ask them. So please, start, at least look at the application if you haven't started it yet. Just so you have an idea of what is required. And if you have additional questions, you have a chance to ask them. So the deadline is April 30th. The review period will be during the month of May, and we plan to announce the grantees for 2023 in June for a grant cycle, meaning when your project needs to be realizing itself between July 1 of this year and June 30 of next year. This is a screenshot from the GRIT Fund's website. In addition to some other general information, in particular, there is a toolkit section. And in the toolkit, there is the full text or plain text of the application if you just want to read what's required before logging on to actually do it. We have a sample budget template in there. That's an Excel document. There's some information in the document just as like a guide, but obviously you can delete and overwrite that. There's a sample project timeline in there. Same thing. It has information in there that's intended to be a guide, and you can overwrite that. That's a Word document. And then there's the entire application toolkit is just one big document that you could download. So new this year, we are accepting applications through Submittable, which is great because last time we did a very kind of piecemeal upload to Dropbox. So this is a far more seamless process where you're putting in your application and there's clear fields for you to upload any additional requirements for the application. I think if you have not used Submittable before, I think you will be pleased with the process. This is what our page looks like on Submittable. So you'll see the GRIT Fund masthead and then just the general information about the grant itself, and then you'll see the buttons below to submit or to start an application. You're attending our second information session. We will have a third information session on the 20th of April from 6 to 7. That's going to be both a little reception at the Peel, an info session. So we'll talk about GRIT Fund and those to RSVP for that. That's available in the Peel's Eventbrite page. We also have on the website recordings and transcripts from our 2022 info sessions. Those are available as well. And I would, highly recommend taking a look at those if you have additional questions. We try to bring in artists and artist groups that have done a wide variety of different types of projects, just so people can get an idea of things that have been funded in the past. So definitely check those out. We also have an FAQ, a fact sheet on there that has some typically asked questions. Definitely take a look at that as well. That's on our GRIT Fund website. And so that's it. I went through that fairly quickly. Definitely always feel like you can reach out to me. That's me on the screen there, Krista, and my email, gritfund@thepeel.org, and my phone number, which you can call or text. Now we are really excited to have with us today one of our 2022 award recipients, Ashley Minner-Jones. And she is a community-based artist from Baltimore, Maryland. She is an enrolled member in the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. She earned her community arts MFA from MICA and her PhD in American Studies from the University of Maryland, College Park. Her project, Baltimore Indians, is an online exhibition of our archival photos featuring members of Baltimore's American Indian community. Thank you so much, Dr. Minner, for being with us this afternoon.
Thanks, Krista, for having me. Y'all, I'll just show you a little bit about our project, which was tentatively titled Working Baltimore Indians, and then it ended up being called Safety in Numbers. Am I able to share my screen?
Yeah, actually, Krista, if you can unshare yours so Ashley can share hers.
Sure. Thanks, Krista. How long would you like me to talk? Couple minutes?
Yeah, and then
Muted, sorry. I would say 15 or so. Give us like a half hour to chit chat with folks who have questions.
and
Sure.
I just want to interject before we get started is after Ashley is finished, there have been several questions that came in through the chat, Krista, and then I will cover those I will ask those when we're finished with Ashley's presentation.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Cool. Thanks, y'all. And also I see friends in the audience. Hi, Timothy. Hi, Gina. Hi, everybody. So our Grit Fund project ended up being titled Safety in Numbers, Portraits of East Baltimore's Reservation. It was a collaboration between myself and two other Baltimore Lumbee folks. You talk about risk-taking. I'm the only one of us who now works professionally as a curator. My day job, the Stanton Lewis is a construction worker, and Tiffany Chavis was a social worker. Now she's a librarian. So that was the core partnership. And then we also had my good friend Sean Scheidt working with us as a photographer. Another dimension of our project was adding sites to BaltimoreReservation.com, which I'll talk about, and our fabulous web designer Katie Lively. And then an exhibition essay by Dare Turner, who is a curator in her day job also, but she is also an artist and a designer, and she's a member of the Yurok tribe of California. Okay, so if you don't already know, it's been my big project the last few years to make public resources about Baltimore's American Indian community, which exists, if you didn't know that too. The best one that you can access freely anytime you have the internet is BaltimoreReservation.com, and this is what the homepage looks like. And there you can see, I think at this point, over 60 sites that are historically significant and contemporarily significant to our community. You can see archival photos and photos that Sean took for us in the last couple of years. You can tour the neighborhood, which it bridges Washington Hill and Upper Fells Point without ever going there. So part of our project was to make some updates to this resource. And while I was doing the research to produce that resource in the first place, I did a lot of work in archives, and I was finding information about the buildings. Like the website was originally focused mostly on buildings, the built environment, but I was also finding great archival photos of our community members, and it just wasn't a great way to incorporate those into what we were making at the time. So our Grit Fund project, the primary thing we did was create a photo exhibition just featuring portraits that we found in the archives to uplift our people tied to the place. The Baltimore Reservation project got a lot of publicity when it first launched, and that attracted the attention of Tiffany, the social worker turned librarian here at the top. And she started processing things for a new Ashley Minner collection in the archives at UMBC, where all my research lives. And we enlisted the help of Stanton Lewis, the construction worker, below here to help us identify people in the pictures that were being processed. So then we had this great idea for the photo exhibition. Tiffany and I went back into archives everywhere looking for more portraits of people. Here we are in special collections at UMBC, back at the Enoch Pratt downtown, at the Maryland Center for History and Culture. And then because all of our work on this project happened during the pandemic, we really were meeting in like public parks. This was our office, our workspace, and we were going through family photos and photos sourced from institutional archives and periodicals, just like this, like if we were at a family reunion or something, and making our selections. This is these are a few that were chosen. Stan, when he was a baby at the daycare that probably birthed the idea of the Baltimore American Indian Center in the late 1960s. The mural being painted on our building, which, okay, so the Grit Fund made it possible to source a lot of these images from collections that are proprietary, where they want licensing fees, and otherwise we would have never been able to acquire these. Family photos like Tiffany's grandma here, every Lumbee grandma, when East Baltimore Street was a different place, kind of like, you know, just more Indians on the scene. This is a picture of a man named Buddy Porter, who a lot of our folks worked in the trades to escape sharecropping, and I thought it was a really good, I like his shoes. Y'all notice he's wearing penny loafers while he's working on sheetrock, and you see all the dust. Mr. Slim Hunt, who, you know, so this project generated some press. We had a great piece on YPR and then one in the Banner recently. And it was about Slim Hunt, the man in this picture, who felt like he had to wear this very Hollywood headdress in 1966 to be recognized for who he was in the Baltimore Sun, which cropped the images. So like we decided to leave all the crop marks from the press rooms in the exhibition. You can see beyond the frame that you would have seen in the newspaper, and you see like what else is he wearing, you know, you get an idea beyond that. These little Indian boys that were in the East Baltimore photo documentary project at UMBC, who we didn't know their names when we saw them, but we saw them and we were like, oh yeah, there's some Lumbee kids playing in Patterson Park, sure enough. So BaltimoreReservation.com to see the exhibition, which I'll take you there also myself right now, and Baltimore Reservation on Instagram. So let's look at it real quick. If you go to the website, you scroll, and this great archival photo becomes colorized. Katie Lively, our designer, brought it back to life. Shortcut up the top to the photo exhibition. So this is what our project became. And you can see we organized photos by category: family, work, social life, heritage, and education. And what was interesting was they almost ended up being overlapping, like a photo and family could just as easily fit in social life or heritage or education. We just needed a way to organize them for the purpose of the page loading. Like there's interesting constraints around building a website instead of like a gallery, a physical gallery exhibition. We had our curator statement to say what we were trying to do ourselves. Here's Dare's essay that she wrote for us to contextualize it, and the rest of kind of like American Indian art history and also contemporary photo history. And I can answer any questions you want about the project. I will offer that it took us a few months longer than it was supposed to, because people caught COVID, people had babies, they got new jobs, all of these life situations. And like, I guess, I don't know, that happened. That's never happened to me before, but the Grit folks, Krista was gracious enough to let us have an extension, and we did get it done. So yep. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, we'll open the floor for questions for either of us. Kim, I know you said you had
Yeah, we have one of our guests today is wondering if a project is a product like a game, movie, or piece of music with a video component. Is this considered public facing, or are these mediums excluded?
Nope, that is public facing.
Okay. The next question we have is, how many rounds of review are there with the jurors? Could you explain the jury process a little bit in more detail?
Sure. So I guess the first pass is Krista going through your applications, making sure that all the things that are required are included. And if I notice that something is not included, I will, reach out to you so that a complete package can go to the jury. And there are 2 rounds. So there's one round that they're doing through the submittable system, and they'll be able to rank your proposal based upon those core values that I talked about earlier. And then after that first round, we look at the scores, or I look at the scores that they have assigned, and we then go back on a second round looking at the top of the scoring. So if you say that you get in 100 applications and you go through the scoring, the in-person review with the jury after that first round is probably going to be the top 20 or so, depending on what the spread is of values. I mean, if this year is anything like last year, there is very little spread between those folks at the very top. And of course, it makes it very difficult for the jury. But definitely it's a 2-round process.
And Kristen, can you please go into those core values in a little bit more depth?
Oh, okay. Can I have to go back to the screen? I don't know them. Since I want to make sure that I say what I've got listed. I don't want there to be any deviation. Do we want me to put it back up on the screen?
Sure.
Okay, let me share my screen again. No, that's not the screen. This is the screen. Okay. I need to move the thing out of the way because it's my way.
Well, I think we can see this.
No. I know you can see, but you know how when you're sharing, then the thing for Zoom moves around, and so it's right in the middle of my screen. All right, I've gotten rid of it. So those core values, again, collaboration, and this language that's here is the language that you will see in the application. So process of 2 or more people working together to make decisions. Multiple people coming together to share their ideas, their power investment in the project, the authorship of the project. Accessibility, prioritizing public access and valuing the participation and the inclusion of disabled audiences. So if you are having a in-person festival or exhibition or something of that nature, have you taken into consideration how everyone can enjoy that experience? That is not only physically, but are you thinking about what other barriers that may be out there that are preventing people from finding out about your program, et cetera? Some of that might be mitigated through your community collaboration, but how are you thinking about accessibility for your project? Resonance, does the work achieve a sustained value? Does it make an impact? Is it memorable? And obviously we're talking about we're hoping for a positive impact here. But the idea is we want projects that are really looking at investment beyond the actual project itself. Risk taking, I know that that's pretty broad. I mean, all of these are a little broad, but are you trying to move the envelope, or are you, adhering to a status quo? Are you thinking out of the box? Are you really trying to change, push a narrative? So that's what we're talking about, risk taking there. And then cultural integrity. I'll even make this a little bigger. I don't know if you all can see that on my screen. So cultural integrity, what is that relationship between the artist and the organizers to the work that's being presented? Is there true value and honesty being reflected in the program proposal? Or is it exploitive, quite frankly? So, and then those other bullets kind of support that. How is the project conceived? If it's done in collaboration, there's going to be a certain level of realness to the project. If it wasn't, then it may not be that way. Does it involve stakeholders? Understanding for cultural values, all of those things. Just cultural integrity. Is this coming from a place of authenticity, or is it fake? So those are the values.
Okay, Krista, if there is an artist leading the project and they live and work in Baltimore, but some of their collaborators do not, is that an acceptable project when not all partners?
As long as it's clear that the public-facing portion of the project is being realized here, obviously if it's a digital thing, that may be a little different, but the idea is that it is centered in this place.
Okay. And how many grants do we expect to award?
Last year, we awarded 10. I would assume that about that number will get awarded this year. I mean, I'm going to say that, but it is up to the jury, how awards are made. So I'm going to say around 10.
And the value and the amounts of them vary as well. It's not
correct.
all.
So the top award is 10,000, and I believe our smallest award last year was 5,000.
Okay, all right. And the next question I have actually is for Ashley. So Ashley, what part of the project that you did was the grant proposal for?
Thanks. I actually answered in the chat, but I appreciate the opportunity to expound. So that probably was a little confusing. The main thing, the GRIT project, was what the funds were dedicated to, is creating that new photo exhibition, safety in numbers, and all the research that led to it. But there was a line in there to expand the Baltimore reservation.com tour. So I think we proposed to add an additional 6 sites or something, and we ended up adding like 9. We did more than we said we were going to do, but there was funding in there to make that resource more robust. The main thing was the photo exhibition.
Okay, and you indicated an interest in speaking a little bit more about accessibility and how that was addressed in your project. Can you please expand on that?
Yes, thank you. I meant to say this when I was sharing earlier. Accessibility is a value, as Krista mentioned, of the GRIT Fund, and I think it should be a value for all of us in our respective practices as well, especially in public-facing work, because the public needs to be able to access it. And in the public, there are people coming from a range of abilities. So I would like to own that, because I have been a student of George Sissel in my life, who's one of his personal missions now is to lean on cultural institutions to make their public offerings fully accessible, that it's now also part of my mission. And the site we created, the way we did that, we used high contrast palette. All of the fonts are serif, so they're easier to see and read. And then all of our images and texts, you can do, they can be read with a screen reader, and there are embedded image descriptions. We also, when we had our public launch, we had ASL interpretation and live captioning, and there are a few wonderful companies that provide that service. But if you're going to have like any kind of public event, I think that should be part of it. And it's good to consult with someone who, like, you don't have to figure all of this out yourself. You can consult with the Grit Fund or somebody who really knows about accessibility to see what you should be thinking about as you're doing your planning, as you're crafting your budget. And make sure you don't forget that when you are doing your budget, the interpretation for our event, which was just an hour online, was a little over $500. So it's a chunk, and it's a necessary chunk.
And Krista, that actually, there's another question about accessibility. Or when the jurors do they have a specific set of guidelines that for accessibility that they take into account when they're doing their review? And is that something that can be shared if there is?
The guideline is exactly the guideline that artists get. It's the same language. So when I ask you a question in your grant application that says, speak to your accessibility, when the question is posed to the jury, it's how did the artist talk about the accessibility in their project? It's exactly the same language. I mean, I could probably share the rubric, but it is exactly the same. I really want,
so is that,
I think I want to convey that we want to make the process as clean and clear as possible. And so whatever questions I'm asking in the application to the artist for the proposal is exactly what we're posing to the jury. How did these people, collaboration was a requirement. How did they meet that requirement? It's a direct, it's directly related. But I can share the rubric. I think maybe I can put that on the website as part of the toolkit.
Okay. We have one question here and on site.
Hi there. I'm an artist, and I've applied to the Grit Fund in the past, and it may or may not be appropriate for the things I'm interested in doing. But one of the things that is always a kind of an unknown when you're putting the budget together is to what extent, or to what is the percentage of artist fees versus the other costs that go into the project. And and that's always a tough one, because obviously artists put in so much personal time regardless of what kind of money they get. And then there's also some technical considerations and materials costs as well.
Mm-hmm. I would say that 30% is what you should be shooting for. Definitely between 30 and 50. You don't want necessarily your budget for your project to be asking for more than 50% for fees, for stipends or fees.
Yes, right. Thank you.
Unless there is a performative nature to your project, and so that's a different kind of thing. You're paying for a performance that would be taking place. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's like the stipend that you're paying to your collaborators. And then there's the stipend that you may be paying for the execution of your project. And that may very well be more than 50% of your budget, because if it's a festival or, some other kind of live event, that may change the fee structure there or change the amount going to artist fees.
Right. Okay. Well, because if you have, say, two people kind of at the top of the food, you know what I mean? At the top of who are kind of organizing the project, but then
Mhm.
they're bringing other people in more in a participatory nature. I mean, that's where I was coming from with that question.
Right. So the participants, those fees are, that is different, or that is additional, basically.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay, right now, we don't have any more questions in the chat. Is there anyone, any members, any participants that have any additional questions?
I have one small question. Just a clarification on, thank you, Ashley, by the way, for your presentation. That was awesome. The collaborators, could there be one artist, one scientist? I mean, do they have to absolutely identify as an artist, or can
No,
the
that's totally fine.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Hi, this is Eric Cotton. I have a question. I'm thinking about proposing a project, it's a community-based project, much like Ashley's amazing project, but it deals with gentrification in the West Baltimore corridor. It would involve a short documentary film in addition to multiple community activities related to that. Does that seem within the scope of?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? I know you have them.
I think we may be out of questions for now.
Well, you can always email me. Oh, wait, here's one. Could you explain the last core value and how it involves stakeholders? So we're talking about cultural integrity. I'm just being clear. Yes, okay. So I think, like, if you were doing, and I'm going to use Ashley's project, for instance. So Ashley very specifically is talking about the Baltimore Indian, Baltimore Lumbee. And so it makes perfect sense that she is going to collaborate with people who are identifying that way. If Ashley had done a project and collaborated with people who were not part of the Baltimore Indians, then it would have been a question there. And that's what we mean about cultural integrity. How is she, obviously she's identifying that way herself. So, okay, say she does not identify as a Baltimore Indian or a member of the Lumbee, and she's doing a project, but she doesn't reach out to members of Baltimore Indians. That would be a problem. How are you representing a community that you're not collaborating with? That's what we mean by cultural integrity. Does that make sense? I have to look for the chat. Okay, yeah.
Okay, we have one more question here.
Hi. Yeah. So I really understand where you're coming from, and that makes a lot of sense to me. In the past, I have worked with communities, I'm white, and communities that are not white. So is that an issue? I mean, if I'm collaborating with someone, they'd more likely be from that community as well.
Right.
But, you know, so I just want to,
Yeah, that is the point. If you are not of the community, then it puts more onus on you to make sure who you're collaborating with is from that community. But if you were to do a project about a community and not involve that community, that would be a problem.
yeah, well, that wouldn't be, I would never want to do that, given the nature of the preference, you know, the preferences in the grant initiative.
Right. Right. Okay. I'm double checking the chat too. I want to make sure we didn't miss anybody.
Yeah,
Want some general grant writing advice from me, y'all? I'm pretty good at this stuff. I mean, I have a good success rate. Like when you're answering the question, restate the question and make sure you're actually responding to what's being asked. And you don't have to use the entire word count every time, you know, just say what needs to be said.
I mean, that's actually a really good point about grants is that sometimes sometimes a grant request that I read is that the question gets lost and answering the question doesn't really happen. Just, I mean, it seems like a very obvious thing, but it's surprising how many times sometimes those things are overlooked. Be as straightforward. And also when, the guidelines are given, follow the guidelines and follow what is asked for. So in other words, if you're asked for a 2-page resume, and that's just an example, it's not from the grit fund request, just follow those guidelines because they're put into place for very good reasons. And I think that it's always important when you're doing a grant to follow the specifications as much as possible.
We have another question about other big pitfalls or no-nos that come up frequently. I think that along with making sure that the question is answered, another big thing is not being as specific as you possibly can be about what it is that you want to do. Like, tell us what you want to do, and then tell us again, right? You have it in your head and in your heart what you want to produce. And you have to be as explicit in that description of what you're doing as possible, because someone is reading it and they don't have the same pictures in their heads as they're reading it as you have in yours. So you have to do whatever you can in words to help shape that picture that comes into their head of what your final project is going to be. So really be explicit, descriptive, all of those things with the project details. Make it really clear.
And be clear about the goals too.
Mm-hmm.
And be clear about the outcomes and how those outcomes support the goal. Okay, do we have any other questions at this time?
I'm going to put in the chat again, just where you can reach out to me.
I had one question before we close out, if that's okay. Sure. This will be my first time writing a grant for an art project, and I'm wondering if it's normal for folks to include in the projected budget paying themselves, or if people don't normally do that.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
While we're thanking folks, thanks again to Krista and the Peel for funding our project, which was really important, is really important to our community. And thanks for all of you listening to what I had to say about it. And if you have any questions or want advice from someone who made it through the process, I'll put my email in the chat too.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you, everyone who joined us this afternoon. This is great. I love grants administration, but what I love most about it, aside from being able to give people money, because that's awesome, but I love reading your proposals. I love seeing or reading what people are doing. It's so enjoyable to see the amount of creativity and that's happening in this city. I love it. So don't ever feel like you're writing too much, or you write as much as you need to write to make it clear what you want to do. And I and the jury panel will read those things. Yeah.
And just
Looking forward to it.
Krista, if you don't mind, I just want to remind everybody about our in-person info session. So if you leave here and you realize you have a whole bunch more questions and you want to join us for the in-person info session, it's at 6 o'clock on April 20th here at the Peel. We're diagonally across the street from City Hall, and we welcome you to join us here.